Welcome to the Modern Mythos Podcast, a show dedicated to the keepers and players of Call of Cthulhu and other investigative horror games. I'm John Hook.
And I'm Seth Skorkowski, and together we'll be discussing writing, game mastering, player tips, and how you can apply them to your table. This episode, we're once again joined by Chaosium's creative director, Mike Mason. Mike's got some helpful advice and guidance on how to manage your long-running Call of Cthulhu campaigns.
Welcome, Mike.
Hello, hi. It's great to be here. Hi, John. Hi, Seth. Always fun to chat with you guys. So I'm looking forward to this session about long-running games.
Yes, I think it's going to be a good one. This is something I really like is, trying to get better information on how to be a better keeper, especially for something like a long-running campaign. But before we dive into that, Mike, it's been a long time. It's near the end of the year. What have you been up to?
Well, John, it's been what a year it's been, eh? in and out of lockdowns and all the rest of it. I think we're starting to look at all that in our rear view mirrors now. All being well, fingers crossed and touching wood. Yeah, it's been a busy year as ever. Been working on fairly substantial projects. Has been what my time has been spent on. I spent the first part of the year working on the new edition of Arkham Unveiled. Legend Haunted Arkham, to give it its full title.
Awesome.
And that's kind of all ready to go into production in terms of layout. We're just finishing off some of the new Arkham street maps and the area map of all the kind of creepy, cool places outside of Arkham, as well as, down the streets. And working closely with Matt Ryan, who's doing a tremendous job on these Arkham maps. So they are phenomenally brilliant. They are wonderful. And I can't describe them enough to you in terms of when you see them, they'll knock your socks off. That's the best way to say. And then the second part of the year, I've been mostly in the Victorian era in Gaslight. So I finished developing and editing book 1, which is basically a player's guide to Gaslight, which is exactly what it does on the tin. It is a book for players as well as keepers that gives you all the kind of background on the setting, character generation, even includes the kind of the core rules of Call of Cthulhu. So you can literally pick this up, book up, and get playing. You don't need to necessarily start with the full rule book or anything. And that's currently in art production at the moment. And so that's now meant that I can move my focus over onto the Keeper's book for Gaslight, which is obviously the companion piece, and obviously not for players, but definitely for keepers, because it's got all the cool secrety stuff in there and gazetteer of the horrors of the English Isles in there and scenarios and various kind of stuff. So that's all very exciting. But that's what's keeping me busy. And obviously we've got other stuff coming along, with the people I work with. But that's what's been, taking my time up.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm really excited for Gaslight. I think that'll be a lot of fun.
I know that was going to be my ambush question. It was like, yeah, enough about this. Where's the Gaslight? So okay, I already know that.
and it might be too early, but do you foresee this being a slipcase, 2-book slipcase product, or individual books? So here's the player's book, here's the keeper book. Buy what you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the default will be that it's individual books, because, as I say, the player's book is something every player can buy, because they're going to have their own copy. It's got character gen and all the stuff that they would need in there in terms of, what do you know about London? What do you know about, Victorian era, East Coast New York, that kind of stuff. So it's a player resource. So we want to be able to, have it so people don't have to pay out too much money, down to buy everything. They can just get the one book that they need. I'm not sure yet that we may do a kind of a slipcase version for keepers. If they want to get both and they want it in a slipcase, that might be an option too. At the moment, it's still a little too early to say, because we've not actually gone into layout on any of those books yet. And until we kind of get a final page count, get an idea of what it actually physically is going to look like, what the price point might end up being. It's easy to make a call a little later on that, but certainly, the default will be both books will be available separately to buy as you will.
As a consumer, I think that sounds great, actually. So that's really awesome.
No, I like that, but I also want my special edition hard case something. But that's.
I'm sure we'll do that as well.
I don't even have room on my shelves for half the crap I get. Like I have to own the nice ones.
Exactly.
The other kind of recent things, less to do with the books I'm working on, but in terms of the kind of Call of Cthulhu line, I mean, this is all Lynn Hardy's fault, clearly.
Clearly.
Lynn has obviously spent a lot more time and has kind of moved almost full time onto working on the Rivers of London role playing game. Quite rightly, it needs a an eye on that, a good guiding hand, which obviously what Lynn is doing. And so, but obviously the consequences for that for me is obviously Lynn was full time working on Call of Cthulhu, and now she's sort of swimming around the Rivers of London. We've got a Lynn-sized hole in terms of the editorial process and development. So we've been fortunate enough to help fill that that kind of role of expertise with Jamie in Australia, who does a little bit of time for us. But also recently we've announced taking on Keris MacDonald and to help us. So Keris is a long-time role player, long-time Call of Cthulhu GM, and also a writer in her own right. And also, she also likes playing live action role play and all that kind of stuff. She's been doing that for many years, developing plots and all that kind of thing. She's also got a real kind of, really good knowledge base on the whole Gaslight era in terms of, the actual history and what was going on. So having Keris be able to support the Gaslight line, and in fact, Keris did the initial edits on the books I'm now working on, has been, real help to me and to the line in general. So that's wonderful to have Keris on board now on a more kind of permanent basis to support the line while Lynn is, as I say, working on Rivers. And the other cool thing that happened the other day is that Mark Morrison is joining us as a community ambassador for the Pendragon line. And so Mark's going to be doing similar things to what Alan Carey and Bridget does and Nick, who kind of work in that kind of ambassadorial role to kind of basically support people who are trying to develop their own material and get it online and share it through the Miskatonic repository or the Jonestown Compendium for RuneQuest, and likewise, we'll be doing something similar for Pendragon and as we do for Seventh Sea as well. So, and obviously Mark, who needs really no introduction, has been working on, games for many, many years. His name appears in many Call of Cthulhu books over the years, including, he's one of the masterminds behind Horror on the Orient Express, Reign of Terror more recently, and he used to work for Chaosium back in the day. He was a line editor for the Stormbringer game, amongst others. So, having kind of luring Mark back in, with promises of blood and gold and things, and it's all to the good. So, really looking forward to having Mark kind of championing that kind of community content side of things, which is continues to be a fantastic kind of thread within the wonderful tapestry that is Chaosium, and giving new voices, new writers, more diversity of people being able to kind of share their creations, whether it's actually writing or drawing artwork or creating maps or laying them out, all of them in one. For some people, is a wonderful thing, and we're seeing some fantastic product on the Miskatonic repository, and it just seems to grow from strength to strength. So having Mark on board as well will, hopefully do similar things, not only for the Pendragon line, but for the other lines as well, because I'm pretty sure Mark will be happy to talk about Call of Cthulhu and all those other kind of things he's had a hand in over the years as well. So that's really cool news too.
That is fantastic. That's awesome.
Great.
Well, let's dive in.
Yeah. So let's talk about Call of Cthulhu campaigns. I've often had to explain to a lot of people when I've talked about Call of Cthulhu to kind of, you almost think of it like there's two different types of the game. There's the very popular one shot people find at conventions or game shops, or it's Halloween. There would game group wants to try something different. They do Call of Cthulhu, and those are usually a bit more hardcore, high body count, like a good horror movie. And then when it comes to campaigns, it's a very different animal. At least that's how I've always described it. And because we've got, Call of Cthulhu's got some of these monstrous campaign books, but then there's just, we're going from adventure to adventure to adventure. And I've always said, like, it's very different than a one shot. So, how do you see that, Mike? Is that kind of along your lines? Do you see them kind of more the same, or?
No, I think there are. I think, well, for me, that's one of the real attractions to Call of Cthulhu. Has been since I started playing back in the early '80s. Is the fact you can alter the style of game fundamentally, and yet still have a very similar experience and have a great game. So I think you're absolutely right. The two common ones, as you say, Seth, are the kind of the one shot, one night, one convention, or maybe it's a one shot that runs over 2 or 3 sessions over the course of a month or whatever. But it pretty
A
much
realistic gaming group.
Yeah. And I guess the way to kind of codify that is that you either create or you're given a set of characters that you're only ever going to play in this particular scenario. So all bets are off. They are kind of disposable in a sense. Obviously, you can inject them with life and become attached to them, and that's cool. But at the end of the day, once you finish the scenario, whether they survived or not, that's their story done and told. It is a short story, a small novella, a horror film in that sense. Once done, once done. And occasionally, you realize it went so well. Jaws went so well. We'll make Jaws 2. And, the keeper comes up with a reason why the surviving characters can maybe do a follow-on one shot. But again, it really doesn't go any further than that.
Yeah.
And then you've got what we call campaigns. Now, I'm going to break campaigns down into two things, which you highlighted, Seth, really. The first and obvious one is the big single campaign, like Masks of Nyarlathotep or Horror in the Orient Express, or more recently, Time to Harvest, and so on, which is a multi-chapter scenario or a multi-chapter adventure, let's say. And within that chapter, each chapter is effectively a different scenario, but they all link together. And some are very linear, like Horror in the Orient Express, because you're following a train. So, wherever the train goes, there's going to be a scenario at every stop kind of thing. And to the more kind of complex version of that, which would be Masks, where there is a kind of a route that you can follow, but actually you can change that route. You might decide to, you all start in the same place in America, but from there on, the players decide where you go. So they may go to England, or they could end up going to China first, and vice versa. And so, but effectively that world is a sandbox for the campaign, and all of the adventures interlink. They're not standalone. So what you do in one has an impact on another. And if you leave halfway, you don't take down the cult or something in a particular location, and you kind of run screaming into the night, and then take some rest for your characters and kind of rethink your actions. There's no reason why you can't go back and finish the other half. And a year later, we decided to go back to England and actually take down the cult. You can do that. You don't have to follow it in a linear fashion. And that's what you might want to call the grand campaign in that sense. But then you've got that kind of halfway house that is kind of a bit of both. You've got that kind of what you might call an ad hoc campaign, where actually what you're doing is stringing together what would normally be a series of one-shots into a campaign, where, again, you're using the same characters, but they have a life beyond that one starting scenario. And it made, in its simplest form, you just create a bunch of investigators, and they come together and they form their own kind of investigator organization, which let's just call it, the investigation agency. They're the only people involved in it. There's no one else. It's just the investigators, and the investigation agency gets called in to deal with all these different adventures, for whatever way. Now, obviously, keepers and indeed players will feed into this, will find reasons to kind of link these together, and they'll they'll kind of almost by default maybe start to tell a bigger story by default, because cool ideas will come. Like maybe they'll deal with a situation in one, but the monster wasn't quite dealt with, or the villain kind of got away, but the scenario is kind of done. They won. But you've got this kind of loose villain and monster maybe hanging around in the background that actually they're not part of this adventure you were planning to run with them, but actually you can insert them in as a kind of subplot, or maybe you interchanged out the the villain that's in this new scenario with the old villain. Just have them, it's now 6 months later and they've washed up in a new place, and now they're the ones controlling this cult or situation. So you can start to build in these kind of campaign arcs effectively into that kind of campaign if you so choose. But you don't have to. They can be very episodic in nature as well. And it really comes down to the level of effort the keeper wants to put in. If they want to put in more effort, they can build in these kind of seeds and links through the scenarios that come to bear fruit later on. Or they can just not, and it's just effectively a monster of the week kind of deal. Your investigators are going running between these adventures, and who survives gets to go on the next one, kind of thing. I think they're the three modes of play in a nutshell. I think
that's pretty much how I've always seen it.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. I like the idea of taking the scenarios that were not intended to be part of a campaign, but you're just kind of stringing them together because the same investigators are moving from scenario to scenario. Is that something that you've done at your table? Have you taken and run a campaign where it was, unassociated single scenarios that your players just kept playing from one to the other, and it kind of organically became a campaign? And if so, what scenario, if you remember, what scenarios did you link?
I'm struggling now. I mean, I have done it. I mean, I did this much earlier in the day when I started playing Call of Cthulhu. We had a bunch of same players. We had our play group. We met every week, and it was basically trying to fuel the fire. The players wanted to play, and it's kind of like it was really kind of I need something to play, and we don't want to kind of keep starting from scratch every week, so we keep the same investigators and we'd just kind of string them along in the campaign. And so it would have been the early adventure kind of stuff. I'm trying to think now, things maybe out of the original Mansions of Madness, stuff out of the Asylum and Other Tales, that really early, the first scenario collection really. And, and they were, I was a young, inexperienced GM, and I just ran them, as I said, I kind of ran this monster of the week kind of style of game. And occasionally, I'd think, oh, that villain, I'll have them reappear, or I probably wasn't even that complex. I probably would just have another villain mention that villain's name with no intention of putting the old villain in, but just alluding back to them, which always made the players creep out, going, oh no, they mentioned that one we didn't deal with, which was enough, really. That was cool because it meant the players were like, oh. So that's the kind of thing I did, and I think the first thing I actually ran campaign-wise as a proper campaign in that sense was probably the Shadows of Yog-Sothoth when that came out, and man, that was a different experience. But soon, it wasn't too long before the first issue of Masks came out, and I ended up being a player. The GM Gary, who I still play with these days, he ran that, and that didn't end well. That in terms of the player character. But yeah, once we discovered that there were published campaigns and all the work had been done for us, that was an easy, we just did those. And then between doing those, we ran one shots. It was, it just worked out that well. We were very lazy. We didn't want to write lots of stuff ourselves. So we just took what was given and used that.
That has been my experience as well. As far as mine was usually like, oh, I got another game coming up. Let me flip through, see what I got here that looks like it'll be good. Or sometimes I will have like 2 or 3 adventures ahead planned. But I'm more of the episodic. And personally, for me, I think it's because I have such a short attention span that it's like, man, you know what I'm in the mood for? Let's do something in the desert. And then I'll kind of flip through and look for whatever's in the desert or whatnot. And if I can, we'll pull in an NPC. Like, this is how this is related to that other adventure. Sometimes it's a little stretchy. Other times it's like they were intended to be that way. And I come off looking like a genius. But that's usually our way of doing it.
It should probably be noted that there are some keepers out there who want to do the uber grand campaign. They want to run Horror in the Orient Express with those characters, and then those characters are then going to go into Masks of Nyarlathotep, and basically that's one. Joining these 2 big campaigns into one Uber campaign is their intention, and I know it's been done. And and good luck if you do it. I mean, it's, if it works for you, that's fine, but they're not intended to be all taking place in the same game world. As I said, there's only so many times you can destroy the world in one parallel universe, but if you can make it work in your version of the universe for your game, then that's cool too. But I do think of one shot scenarios and campaign adventures as kind of like novels, and I do sometimes, personally, this is that you come to the end of that, having played Masks, and that last session, as you kind of deal with the aftermath and the players talk about their experience, it is like that last kind of epilogue chapter in the campaign, and when you turn the page, that's that story done. You put it on the shelf, and now that's your shared group's memory of how that novel, that book, that adventure ran. And I kind of like that kind of slight separation between them all. But I say that's my personal preference rather than, and I say it's not everything that everyone else does that way. But yeah, what about John? What have you? Is that your kind of experience too? Sort of taking single adventures and stringing them together, or did you not go that way?
Most of my experience has been just with the single one shots. I probably have more experience in gaming at conventions, and I'm talking Call of Cthulhu, than I do playing Call of Cthulhu at home, which is weird. But I'm actually in the process of trying to flip that script right now. Funny enough, with the patrons of this podcast, Modern Mythos, where we're getting together now, where I'm the keeper and patrons are the players, and we're gonna start doing a campaign of I'm gonna link together only by the fact that it's the same investigators, not necessarily that the storylines are interlinking, but these investigators that the players are creating, we're all gonna be in the Miskatonic Valley. They're all going to live and work somewhere in that realm, be it Arkham, Kingsport, something in that realm, maybe as far as Boston and New York. And my plan is to start playing a bunch of single scenarios that are all Miskatonic Valley centered. So we won't be globetrotting, or we won't be globetrotting for a long time. We might go out and come back, but everything's going to have a Miskatonic Valley basis. And we're actually right now playing our first scenario, which is Dust to Dust, which was published way back in the original Dead Reckonings. So we're having a ton of fun with that.
That sounds cool. Yeah. No, I think going back to my opening point, that's why one of the many reasons why I like Call of Cthulhu, because you can change it up, and I think we've talked about the different styles of play in terms of one shots and campaigns, and there's that different kind of play experience as a keeper and as a player. You have the chance with a one shot with a I hate to use the term disposable investigator, but you kind of know what I mean. They're not gonna go beyond that scenario. So you have a chance to do all the things you wouldn't do with a character that you really were uber invested in, because you can play them a bit more, recklessly. You can play them with more risk, because, it's part of the fun that, they are going to push the red button when they shouldn't press the red button. And which is a very different kind of, feeling and style of play to playing in that long campaign where you're invested and you maybe spent longer in developing the character. Maybe you develop your character in relation with the other characters. You did it all together, worked out their relationships and what their relationships outside of the party are, and all that kind of thing. So you're much more invested in that character. But equally, it's a bonus that you're more invested, and you kind of get deeper into not only the campaign story, but the character story arc. I like to see, with a campaign, you've got the actual plot arc of the campaign, but within it, with the characters, they've each got their own personal kind of character arc, and obviously trying to mesh them together is, a lot of the fun. But even then, so you've got that as a bonus. But the downside is, because you're so invested, you don't want to risk them so much. You don't want to press the red button.
Oh yeah.
And so, finding that kind of that style that is a challenge as well, because you've got to save the world, but if you don't press the red button, you ain't going to do it. So who's going to press the red button becomes a really serious discussion, because it's like, well, I don't want to do it. Well, but I don't want to do it either. Well, what are we going to do? Oh no, the world's ended while we've been talking. That becomes a real kind of tense moment in a lot of campaigns when those kind of situations come up. So, I think there's real strengths to both styles of play. I don't think any one is better than the other. It just comes down to your preference and your group's preference at that particular game, really. Tonight, are we going to do a one shot, or do we want to really get into it and spend the next year playing this campaign or whatever it may be?
And that's really great that you bring that up, because I've been thinking about that also from the keeper's perspective, mainly because most of my experience is in one shots, in campaign or in convention plays. And if the culmination of a mystery is, to stop the great old one, is to call down a bolt of lightning that, utterly fries the investigator. As a keeper, I couldn't wait for that scene to come up, right? I'm gonna get to, who do I get to fry? And now, trying to think about it in a long-term campaign, I'm making decisions like, is the bolt of lightning going to fry them? Most likely, yes, but maybe there's a chance that they could survive, So I'm thinking about that and trying to ask questions of myself, like, is this something that the investigator could survive and grow from? Is this an experience that could help them?
I could put some evidence in that there's another way of doing it.
Please do.
If you find the right thing and look at it, you know that there is another option where you don't fry. One of the things that I've also started adopting with our long running campaigns is we go pulp Cthulhu, just because it is a little bit more survival and more, so sometimes my players just really want to kick something's butt. And Pulp Cthulhu is a bit more conducive to occasionally somebody just wants to grab a Tommy gun and just shoot a bunch of deep ones and just be a bunch of dorks. But then everything else we do, like regular call. Has that been your thought? Because I usually recommend Pulp for a campaign, just because I don't want them to get deep into a long running campaign and then die from something mundane. As can happen in regular call.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's obviously we didn't have pulp in the same way that we have it now. Back in the day when I was running this kind of thing, but certainly pulp is definitely an option for the longer kind of style campaigns, because exactly what you just said. So for the start, the characters have double the hit points, so it makes things a little less deadly. And they have the kind of the wider use of the luck resource to kind of do more things with, even survive certain death if they have enough luck points. So it is a really useful tool, particularly for even experienced keepers. But I was going to say less experienced keepers, because it's got that kind of bit of a safety net with it. You can kind of forget what you're doing and suddenly cast lightning bolts at all your party that would fry them all instantly normally. But Pulp, they've got a bit of a cushion, and they can rewrite the kind of the narrative of that scene by using luck, perhaps, gets you, the keeper who shouldn't have done it in the first place, out of a bind potentially. So I think that's definitely
shade at me right now. I feel shade. I feel called out, Mike.
I was going to say John's lightning bolts, really, but a lot of the reason we talk about player lethality, is because of early to middle Call of Cthulhu scenarios, which were written like death traps. There was no idea that players would survive, even in the big campaigns. You read the first edition of Master of the Athertep, there is numerous potential for your characters to die. Now that's fine, but for my money, I don't want as a keeper, let alone a player, I don't want the characters to die for no reason, because it ultimately is dull. It's just unsatisfactory. It's kind of like, well, you failed your climb roll, so I'm afraid you have to take 6d10 damage. Oh, are you dead? Oh, no, never mind. Well, the adventure's at the top of the cliff, so carry on climbing, the rest of you. It was kind of, I'm making a joke of it, but there's a lot of adventures, old scenarios that kind of have that kind of content in. And so one of the things I do when I'm looking at old content is changing that and saying, actually, well, it doesn't have to be a do or die situation here. It's just a climbing a wall, and let's work out what's the difference between a dull death and a fun death. And we'll keep the fun stuff in, but we'll get rid of the dull. And so when you talk about lightning bolts, it's kind of like, well, there's a number of options that you can do. You can have the players strike, have the lightning bolt strike the players, and they may or may not die depending on the dice rolls. That's your starting point. The other one, obviously, then you could then change them into Pulp Cthulhu characters where they've got a better chance of surviving. But it's still down to dice rolls. You know what happens with dice rolls is even though the average is 5, you're going to roll a 10 when you don't want to roll a 10. And how many hit points you got left? 9. Okay, you're dead. So, always, whenever you roll dice in any role playing game, as far as I'm concerned, know what the outcome's going to be before they roll. And don't ask for a roll if there's going to be an outcome you don't want, because inevitably it will happen. So other options are, there's plenty. The world is full of NPCs who can get struck by lightning to exemplify what will happen if the players do X. That's using a handy NPC to be eaten by the monster to just show how bad this monster is. You don't need to eat a player to do that. You can eat an NPC and the players will get the message. So that's one way. The other thing, particularly when you're dealing with human adversaries, if you're dealing with like cultists and the like, there's a kind of like an old school mentality that every combat's got to end in death, and that comes out of the early origins of playing role playing games. But that isn't actually true, because it isn't true in real life. You get into a brawl in a pub. It's not going to be to the death normally. It's normally till somebody doesn't get back up again, or gets knocked unconscious, or the police turn up, or you both get restrained. So apply some real life logic to these situations, particularly with human cultists. It's like, do the cultists actually, normally when the PCs run into the cultists for the first time, the cultists have got no idea who they are. They're just nosy people who've turned up, who are interfering, are busybodies who, or they don't even know that. They're just a bunch of people they don't know who happen to be in the right place at the wrong time. And so any self-respecting cult is going to think, well, hang on, let's just not murder them all outright straight away, because that actually makes our life more complicated, because we've now got bodies to dispose of and police to handle. What they're more likely to do is to try and capture you. They'll get to a situation where rather than kill the PCs, they want to question them. Who are you? Why are you following us around? Why are you doing that? Why are you trying to, they want to gather information and, work out whether they are a threat. Now, once they become a threat, okay, they may be then, they're now on the list for the next sacrifice, maybe. But in terms of gameplay, what you're doing is you're not killing off your PCs willy-nilly. You're actually creating dramatic situations for the PCs to get into and enjoy, get their teeth into. So being captured by the cult is a situation for them now to get out of being captured by the cult, which is gameplay, which is making use of their skill rolls, making use of their fast talks and all the rest of it. And if you've got the situation where, if you're, think ahead, think, well, I think some of the PCs are going to be captured, but I'm going to see what I can do to make sure at least one of them isn't captured. You've got this kind of, you've got one person on the outside whose now job is to free the others. The others are inside. They're trying to free themselves, and you kind of bring it together. You've created a really cool bit of action that isn't actually written in the scenario, but now becomes one of the most memorable points for the players in the game when they look back at, oh, do you remember the time they nearly captured us all and you had to walk in with an AK-47 and take them all out single-handedly? That's the kind of war stories that players tell, and often they come out of the stuff the players and keeper have made up that aren't part of the campaign at all. So that's what I mean about, trying to think about your death traps, your lightning bolts and all that kind of thing, is think about, well, how can I change that up? I can keep it, but I'm just going to change what it does. Maybe it's no longer a lightning bolt. Maybe it's a sleep spell that some cult is casting at them, and they all go to sleep and then wake up in somewhere they really don't want to be.
I was the whole time you're talking, it's like, I think Mike's just describing my adventure, my session of Black Devil Mountain, where it ended up becoming the most elaborate slapstick jailbreak I've ever seen, and. At the end of the day, I think that's like 95% of what we remember. I was like, oh, and there was a whole other adventure going on. There's all this stuff. Do you remember that jailbreak? It's just how everything went wrong. Now, with one-shot adventures and whatnot, usually keepers will provide a pre-generated character or whatnot, and I always recommend that, as that way the players aren't too attached, and if they're new to the game, they don't have to figure out all the stuff. And then with campaigns, I usually recommend make your own character for a campaign. But when it does come to campaign play, especially like these long epics that we have, like Mass of Nyarlathotep or Beyond the Mountains of Madness, are there any recommendations that you would have for players who are in the situation of their keeper says, "Hey, I just bought whatever campaign. Word on the street is it's going to take us 57 sessions. Make me a character." Is there any recommendations you would have for a player that finds himself
I've got a big recommendation for the players. If ever your keeper says that, even if it's about a one shot, let alone a big campaign, the immediate question you should ask your keeper is, what guidance do you give us? Because I think I'm pretty sure we've all had this experience, particularly when we started playing these kind of games, is, we're told that and we're given no guidance on what kind of character or where they should be from or their background or occupation. You just go off and think, oh, I would like to play a lion tamer, and find that the scenario is set on a boat in Iceland. What my character? Why is my character even here? Let alone my skills aren't going to be very useful this adventure. And I think we've all had experiences like that. So one of the things we try to kind of express in not only in our campaign guidance, when you pick up one of our campaigns at the start, we try and give some advice about what investigators might be useful. But in the main core rulebook as well. But so really, I think it is on the keeper. If they've got an idea of what the thing they want to run is, hopefully they have an idea of what style or type of investigators are going to fit in most well. Now, they don't have to tell the players the plot or anything, but that initial setup, as in this takes place in Boston in 1922, is a good start. And you can say, so I need your characters to either be living and working in Boston, or they could be traveling through Boston and spending a few days in the city, but you need to have a character that would be doing that. So your lion tamer based in, Derby in England, why are they in Boston? Are they with the circus? Whatever it may be. So that's step one. And step two of that process is helping your players out, helping your players to build that cohesive party to whatever degree of cohesivity that you require. Obviously, that's a sliding scale. But, either working with your group of players together at the same time in a kind of a session zero, getting them all online together, or doing it one at a time, but feeding the information back to the group so that everyone's got an awareness of what everyone else is doing.
No,
we build that kind of.
So we need a healer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, why are you all playing half-elven fighters? The entire party. Exactly that. So I think it is on the keeper to give some guidance to sort of say, yeah, we are going to, and again, it's a game. Yeah, it's not the puzzle. The game isn't the puzzle. The scenario may present puzzles, but the actual overarching game isn't a puzzle for the players. So a keeper telling them this campaign, actually, there's as you might guess, there's going to be a lot of kind of strange tomes and books in it. And quite a lot of them are going to be in languages other than English. So if at least one or maybe two of you have something more than English language, for whatever reason, it would be a really useful thing. Oh, and this campaign, actually, I know you guys all like, a lot of action kind of thing because it's Pulp Cthulhu. So it's going to be a lot of action. There are going to be a lot of fights in here. So having some characters who can actually, get into a brawl or can hold a gun or whatever, is probably you're going to enjoy the campaign more because it will allow you to get into that. I think saying those kind of things to players is good, because it means the players will get the most out of it. Don't hide things away from the players, when you don't need to. So I think, try discuss about the kind of who, what, and where for each of their characters, and obviously do that in consideration of all the other players and how they all fit together. It may be that they all meet on a subway train and they don't know one another, and so it is completely random. But as I said, you still don't want them all to be half elven fighters sat on the train. You want somebody who can speak a language. You want somebody who can climb walls. You want whatever it may be. I think it's on the keeper to do that because you are starting them off. But once you've started them off, then help the players, facilitate the players to find the best character for them, basically, so they will enjoy and make the most of the game you intend them to play.
I was really hoping you just give me an answer so I could do less work, but that makes sense.
Well, we try and make that easy with, if you go from masks, you go to the introduction, there's a whole section on, creating investigators, whether you're, making them from scratch, here's a skill list of useful skills you might want. Here's a list of kind of occupation types. You might just give them that. You don't even have to read it to them. Just give them, that page, as it were, and let them get on with it. And then it's down to them whether if they choose to ignore it, then that's their problem.
The world that Call of Cthulhu exists in is absolutely fascinating. I think one of the exciting things for players is to get a glimpse of that real truth, of the alien truth that is just under the veneer of civilized society. And that can be really, really interesting and fun and very revealing to get that kind of insight. But not all of those scenes may or may not be pertinent to the mystery that's being investigated at that time. So that, to me, that kind of brings up a conundrum between atmospheric scenes that are just interesting and give you a glimpse of the world that we live in, that we're all victims of, versus the mission focused scenes. And I didn't know if that was something that you've ever employed in your games, kind of giving color to the world by having these vignettes that don't necessarily contribute to the furthering of the investigation, versus every scene is going to be something that is pertinent to the mystery that's being solved. And in my experience, it feels like, and maybe I'm not, understanding this completely, but it feels like it would be maybe less distracting or easier to put those kind of atmospheric scenes in a smaller, self-contained kind of one-shot, versus when you have a long-running campaign, especially if the campaign has already had greater than 20 hours of investigation already invested. Do you start, is there a loss of enthusiasm if you kind of put in things like, fun atmospheric scenes versus keeping the investigation rolling with the mission focused ones? Does that, any of that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so there's a number of ways you can come at this. Okay, well, here's one. Think of your campaign like a big epic novel or even a big epic film. And you find this with films, that earlier on you have the establishing shots. Yeah, you have these establishing scenes that tell you about the characters. They tell you about the environment they live in. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but you know what I mean. Those kind of they're not part of the plot. They just establish the setting and the characters. And you can follow the same kind of principle with a bigger campaign. So in the early days, so when they first arrive at a new location, before the kind of plot has picked up again or even started, you have your establishing stuff. And that's when, if you want to, do that scene where the young street urchin, tries to steal the pocket watch of investigator, and they have a mini chase around the markets, and they work out, no, it wasn't a deep one stealing, it's just a child urchin, and they've run away with their watch. Or they capture the urchin and they get their watch back, and now they have a dilemma. Do we, they only stole it for food, do we turn them into the police, or do we let them go? Do we take them for a meal? You have all those kind of little establishing, which helps them to develop their characters and get a sense of the environment, the world that they're operating in. And I think that can work quite well early on. And in again, I'm trying to allude it to things I can point people towards. So Mask of Athertop again, each takes place in a different country. So the opening kind of material, there are kind of optional kind of scenes like that. Where you're dealing with the keeping your luggage. Making sure your luggage gets from your transport to the hotel in one piece and isn't stolen, or that you tip the handlers and so on and so forth. That really got nothing to do with the plot, but they just help to establish a sense of that location. You enter Egypt and the smells are different, and people are coming up to you in the street wanting to sell you, things from their market stall or whatever it may be. And in London, you get people doing the same thing, but the smell's different and they're selling you very different kind of things. And actually what they're trying to do is, are you up to rob you later, or whatever it may be. And I think you can do that because that's what it works. You can see it works really well in films. It works really well in novels. But again, following that kind of logic, as the novel gets into the plot, as the film gets into the plot, you get less of that because your focus is now on the plot. Your focus is on the cool core stuff. You don't, James Bond halfway through the film doesn't now start, interacting, with the locals that have got nothing to do with the plot. Every interaction is to do with the plot from there on. Everyone he meets is a key NPC. It happens in the key location and is some sort of set piece where there's explosions and a car chase or a gunfight or whatever it may be. And so follow that same dynamic, because that's what will happen to your players. When they start, they don't know anything. Everything they know about the world is what's coming out the keeper's mouth. And so, you're setting the scene, the color. But as the plot gets into it, the players start to take that part of that agency and they start to direct the play. They say, well, we've got this clue. We want to go to this place here, and they take the lead. So they decide where they're going to go. So, and they're focused on the clues. They're focused on the plot because they want to, they now know there's something happening. So they want to stop it. They want to find out more about it. So you interspersing them getting into the plot with a kind of superfluous scene about nothing actually lessens it for the players, because no, we're not interested in the fishmonger. We want to deal with the guy in the library, So you can actually frustrate players by overdoing it in that way. So that's why I think, the rule, the rule of thumb is, it's okay at the start to kind of build that in if it feels right, but maybe not so much as you get into the actual core of that particular chapter of the campaign or whatever it may be. I think that's my kind of, as I say, rule of thumb. It's the same. You can apply the same thing with red herrings. Red herrings in early days might provide an interesting distraction, or they can derail the entire campaign because suddenly the red herring, because the players don't know it's a red herring. Yeah. Only you know that. So the players, all they know is what you tell them about the world and the game. So when you tell them about what you know as a red herring, they don't know that. That could be, for them, the most significant clue that they have to follow up. And suddenly all their attention is on this red herring that goes absolutely nowhere. And you've derailed your own plot because the players are not interested in the main plot now. They want to know about the red dragon of Salt Marsh or whatever the old red herring was, And suddenly you find yourself now rewriting an entire campaign based on one line you throw out in the middle of a game as a bit of a joke. So red herrings you've got to handle with real care. And if you're in doubt, never use them. It's as simple as that. Just don't use them, because they can create more problems than they're worth unless they're really well thought through in advance.
I have a player who will only listen to the red herrings. I can't understand it, but it is one of our jokes of whatever he thinks the investigation clearly leads here is always going to be wrong, even if every other player can clearly see it, because I'm trying to project it. It's his superpower. I love him dearly, but it is an amazing power. One of the things I found though with the kind of the flavor scenes like that is, if my players also understand story structure, and even on a subconscious level, they understand. Raiders of the Lost Ark. We get to Egypt. We're going to see a lot of Egypt life, and then that's going to really quickly taper down as now we're going to talk about the plot. So in our adventures, if I try to pull in the flavor scenes later than the natural story beats, they will immediately assume, okay, this has to be involved in the plot, even on a subconscious level. That's actually when they will gravitate to the little thing I just threw in to like kind of remind them that we're in an exotic location. All of a sudden, they're really interested in a camel merchant, and I don't know how this happened. And it took me a long time to figure out. Say they know story beats. Uh, they have figured out that at this point in the adventure, anything I mentioned must be related to the plot because it does get more concentrated after this point. I don't know where they determine the points are, but that's kind of how I've had to figure it out. As far as if I don't get it in at the beginning, I shouldn't use it because
It's after you get to the hotel. That's when it ramps up. Now
Yeah,
that we're checked in, boom.
we're on to main plot now. No subplots are fun. You know that it's now main plot. I should say a truism really here as well in terms about when real life happens to gaming, because we all meet up, however we meet up online or around the table or whatever it is for a regular campaign. Whether it's once a week, once a month, once a fortnight, whatever it is, doesn't matter. There's a truism of us being humans is that sometimes when we meet up, we're not 100%. We are, the day job or life has played its toll this week. And I turn up and my heart's, I want to play. I'm excited to play, but my heart's not in it. I'm distracted or I'm just a bit tired. And so nothing too heavy tonight. I don't have to make really important decisions tonight because I'll make them badly because I'm too tired kind of situations, which always happens sometimes, especially when you're playing a long campaign that's over a course of months or even years. You're going to have off nights. Now, there is a secret and a trick here that you can, what we're talking about, used very effectively, because you can use one of those scene setting, I'm calling them scene setting, but you know what I mean, that kind of a sub scene, nothing to do with the main plot, a red herring even, but it is self-contained and clear when you get to the end of it, as in, the red herring takes you this location. Once you've searched the location, you got what you could get from there, and there's no more to get. That's a self-contained thing. You can use one of those to run on those nights when everyone's not on their A game, and you can almost, and I have indeed said this to the players. Hey, you know what? They'll all discuss at the start what their key aims are or what they're going to do or which clue they want to go and follow up. And they go, oh, you know what? I think we've got everything we need now. We know where the cult's headquarters is. We really need to just go and, bash in the door and take it down. And everyone looks at each other going, yeah. And you can just read that they're not with it tonight. And whatever they do, if they bash them doors out, they ain't coming out alive because luck will have it their rolls will be awful as well. So you say to them, hey, but do you remember that other clue you had about that? Or there's a knock on the door and the delivery boy delivers them the note with the invisible ink that says red herring on the top that will immediately distract them away from the main plot to do this subplot. And that's what you do tonight. And you say, hey, why don't you do that one tonight? And say, hey, I get a feeling everyone's a bit tired tonight. So it's going to be quite an involved session once you get into that. Why don't you follow that other one that you were talking about? And, we can probably do that tonight. And then you can focus fully on that one next time. I've said that to players, just as their friend and GM, nothing to do with plot. Hey, why don't we do this tonight? I think there's a bit of a fight involved, but it's not very hard kind of thing. Get them on board. They actually end up having quite a good fun, nice night. They know whatever they do won't interfere with the main plot. They can't screw it up. And then, they go back to the main plot, next session or whatever. I mean, I've done that. I do it. I still do it. Because people are, as I say, life gets in the way sometimes, and you just got to roll with it.
It's like whenever your series is, all of a sudden there's that one off episode where they just kind of ignore the bait plot. They do this other thing and say, oh, yeah, Kevin worked a lot of hours that week, so that's why we did that. It's the true reason that side quest suddenly happened out of nowhere.
It's funny, maybe only tangentially associated with this. When I was just recently having a session of Dust to Dust, the investigators are the players are just having a great time, and they were talking to an NPC about this NPC's daughter who had passed away, and any friends or associations that she may have had when she was alive. And I don't know why I said it, but off the top of my head, I said, "Oh yeah, she," because they asked, does she belong to any clubs or anything? And the father is a very wealthy person, so he said, "Oh yes, the country club," and then also she was a member of the Daughters of the Revolution. Now I don't know why I said that. It just popped into my head, right? And the players went, Daughters of the Revolution. That sounds interesting. And that for the end of the until the end of that session, I was like, why did I say that? So we ended the session, and of course, you stop playing and you're kind of winding down, and the players are talking amongst themselves, and they're like, yeah, next week we're gonna go and we're gonna talk to the Daughters of the Revolution and find out what we can about her. And I'm just shaking. I'm like, why did I do that? And in that week I was able to go, oh, you know what, in the campaign, in this not campaign in this scenario, there's an NPC, a friend of the deceased. Now the way it's written, you run into her over there. And I was like, well, of course she's also going to be part of the Daughters of the Revolution. So now she's in the office, kind of running that little public office, so that when we got together the next week, I was like, I'm totally ready. And so they were like, we're going downtown. And I was like, well, yes, let's go downtown. And they went into the office, and behold, they met the NPC. I was like, I was able to move that around. But I'm like, why do I say things at certain times? I just,
We,
how
we,
does
all,
that
we, all,
happen?
we all do, John, but that's a perfect way of making it work, in reverse for you. You kind of work out, oh, I've created my own problem here. How do I deal with it? And I've talked about this before about moving the clues around to suit the player agency is just fine, and you did that. And I mean, it's also the other way of handling that is Seth's. I've heard you talk about this one as well as me, but the whole Marlowe moment. Their players are all now convinced they need to go to X, and they don't need to go to X at all. It's a big waste of time. That's the point. You have the door kicked in, by the police, by the cultists, by the Spanish Inquisition. It doesn't really matter, but it will change the players' focus, and they'll forget they need to go there because you've moved the plot on. You've just moved it on. You can also kind of employ that tactic, but obviously you can't do it every week, I guess.
No, but my compliments, John. That is the way to save that. Is you look at what's there and you're like, okay, so I randomly added this aspect to this one character because I don't know why. I always like to also imagine there's a part of my brain that's sitting there screaming, like, what are you doing? Who's perfectly aware, as the other part of me is just talking and adding and thinking they're smart. And it's like, no, you idiot. But okay, well, I'm going to add this same aspect to this other NPC. Now they are linked, and now it looks like they followed the clues beautifully, and not knowing that you've held it together with spit and duct tape this whole time. The other tactics I'd recommend is we'll do a quick summary. Oh, you guys go there and blah blah blah. You have a bunch of tea and cookies, and not much happens. Back to the thing.
Yeah.
Or I'll never stop praising the idea roll enough, as far as okay, you guys are absolutely obsessed with some really weird red herring that I may or may not have put in, or you guys made up randomly, as far as let's get this thing back on a direction that will satisfy all of us, as versus them chasing their tails. Because before, when I had run games without that would be when all of a sudden they would, I don't know where they got their ideas from, and they're going off in left field, and I'm panicking because there was no logical way I could even bring it back. So when I remember when I first read Stuff of the Cthulhu, and I read how the idea roll works, I was like, oh my God, this is okay, guys, we're going to try mysteries again. I think I've got the answer. I've got a ripcord. Because No, sometimes you do throw out like that little flavor text, like, oh, she was really active in the Daughters of the Revolution, and you expect that will be the end of that. And now we can go on. And somehow, maybe it was the twinkle in your eye that they read as this is the clue, and the twinkle really meant, oh, I'm really clever for adding this little bit of flavor text here. And they misread that twinkle, and now you have only yourself to blame. So, but very good job, John. Very impressed.
Yeah, they're very good. Because, I mean, it goes back to what we said earlier about, the players only interpret the plot, the world, everything through what you tell them or what you show them as a handout. And not what you show them a handout are normally pre-prepared, so they normally don't go wrong because you know what they do. But when it's your what's going through your head and comes out your mouth, that as you exemplified, John, there, that's what they pick up on. And even as Seth says, even you playing it down, but you just say it in that certain way, or that you give a player a certain look and they just misinterpret it, and they that's it, that's the one, we've got to go there. That was a hint. I didn't hint at all, but yeah, absolutely spot on.
So, long running campaigns indicatively have tons of clues, lots of information. Short of a corkboard with push pins and red string, zigzagging all over it, do you have any tips or tricks or advice on particularly how players should organize and keep those clues straight and keep their thoughts straight? Or is there any advice for something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it comes down to the kind of group you are and the personalities and their interests, and so it's one thing doesn't work for everyone. But some gaming groups do have that corkboard on the wall, and they'll make it like a full-on, detective board with the red string and all the rest of it, and that's just great. Other groups won't have that. Maybe they're playing online, so maybe what they can have is a shared Google Doc. I mean, I played with a group where they had a shared Google Doc, and they just. Any one of them could go in at any time during the game or between games and just write in notes, or, hey, we need to remember to do this thing next week, guys. Or I've gone through the player handouts, and these are the 3 things that I think are important from the handout, rather than reread the handout, I've just put it here kind of thing. So that can be quite effective. I mean, the other one, I mean, I use as a keeper, and I think it could be useful for a group if one of them or all of them are of this mind. When I'm running a big campaign that takes place over a course of months or whatever, I just get a diary. I just get like a standard kind of desk diary kind of thing, and I just work out whatever date they start on. I don't worry about the days of the week necessarily. I mean, I might just finagle it and just say, okay, Monday's the 1st of January. That's the day we start, and I'll just use whatever's printed in the diary as the dates for that year, even though they don't actually correspond with the dates of 1928, let's say. It doesn't really matter. The players aren't going to look at that hard. And I use the diary for my keeper's notes. So on that day, I write, at the end of the session, I just write, okay, they went here, they spoke to such and such, they got this clue that's going to take them to, scene 8 or whatever it is, So when I come to my next session, I just can look at my 1-page quick bullet points of, okay, that's what they got last time. That's where they should be going next. So when I start the session and say, okay, so what happened last time, everyone, and get them to do the recap, if they miss anything I've written down, that they actually do know that they've just forgotten as people, I can throw in, by the way, don't forget, you also found that newspaper that said something about the lifeboat or whatever it is. And they go, oh, yeah. And that's the player forgetting, not the character forgetting. So I think that's okay. So I use that, and I think players could maybe do something similar. They could just get a diary and go, okay, on this date we went to the Daughters of Revolution. We met what's her face, and she told us we need to go to X. And they could just use it exactly like I would use it as a keeper. That could be useful for some groups. And again, that could be a real diary, that could be a Google Doc, could be some sort of shared resource online. I don't know. Those sort of things are handy. I mean, normally in my experience, it's normally one player who's the one taking all the notes, because everyone else is like, well, they seem quite happy to do it. We'll just let them do it, carry on. And we can just play. There's poor soul doing all the note writing. But sometimes some certain people like doing that, so that's cool. That's part of their game.
Well, yeah, my wife is our journal keeper, and she actually has difficulty playing even a one shot without the group journal that she writes out, which my players love. I love, but they've at least learned most of them have learned to keep meticulous notes. One of the things I had recently done when I'm doing the How We Roll podcast, we've got our Google Doc, and I love it because we will have a month or two between sessions, and I've slept, and I don't remember exactly what's happened, so I can go review the Google Doc and keep that as our living document as to like, what are we doing? Who did we talk to? What did we plan on doing at the end? And that helps jog the memory. But in one of our recorded games that I'd recently done, we had posted online. I remember seeing a lot of comments of people asking what I was working on during the game. And it occurred to me that a lot of players, it never occurred to them to take notes. The fact that I kept looking down and writing while the game master was talking, they thought that I was working on, I don't know what they thought I was doing, but the idea that I was actually like writing down, like, okay, this name, this thing, all the clues that were being dripped down, it hadn't occurred to them that a player should maybe write that down. Kind of blew my mind.
It's a really interesting point, Seth. It's really true because Call of Cthulhu is unlike many, the majority, let's say, of other role-playing style games where players aren't required to kind of have that group memory or even personal memory other than, maybe remember the last thing they attacked or fought or encounter they had, and that just because they're a lot simpler plot wise. They're not a mystery that's kind of got multiple layers or clues that lead to different things. They're much more linear. I go to this room and then I have to go to the next room, or I'm in this location. I know the outlaws are there, so we're just going to go there and get the outlaws. They're much more simple in terms of structure. And so there's not a requirement necessarily to take that level of notes or even any notes, because, you can just remember that, or somebody will remember it to tell you. And so that's one of the things when you come to a game, like Call of Cthulhu, that unless somebody says, hey, it might be useful to take notes here, people, they may not necessarily think about doing it. You're absolutely right. Yeah. So it's a good pointer to just help players out to say, hey, it's okay to take notes. In fact, here's some paper and pens, go for your life.
I will issue out small little pads to my players as my subtle hints. It also enables me to, when they lose the thread, go like, guys, I give you notepads. I can't make you write them, but I can at least give you absolutely every tool you need to make your notes. And that at least allows me to give you the finger waggle if nobody used it. So.
That's right. You can lead the horse to water. You can't make them drink.
No.
That's where, in the game sense, if they, decide they don't want to take notes and, you do your best to help them out to kind of keep things on track. At some point though, you say, well, do you, remember this or whatever? And they go, oh, well, no, I don't think that was right. And you go, well, okay, well, let's make an idea roll then, because I'm not just going to regurgitate the entire plot to you because it's going to take far too long. Let's just see what you thought was important. Make an idea roll in that sense. So that's a way that you can use mechanically to kind of get past some of that. Sometimes if players are downright refusing to kind of remember anything.
Mike, this was awesome. Thank you for all the great information and tips on long-running campaigns.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's nice to sort of get into a topic like this in a bit more detail, because there's this, I said there's not one solution to these things. It's often whatever works for you is a thing you can kind of latch onto. I can hear my cat in the background. I don't know if you can hear him. It's at that time of day when he's decided he's going to get up from his day-long sleep to bother me. So, but yes. So anyway. Yeah, no, so it's been a pleasure. Always great to get into it with you guys.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And there's so many great things coming out from Chaosium. Actually, something I just got is the new book Leaves of a Necronomicon. And this is so cool because I bought the EPUB version, but I hadn't dug into it yet. And so now that the print version is available, I was like, well, I got to get my physical copy. I just assumed that this was just a regular anthology, which I love anthologies. I will bounce around and just read whatever stories I want. Maybe there's an author that I like, or, I want to read something that's a little shorter, but this is a braided novel. And I was like, oh, that is such a cool concept. So you really feel compelled to read it, diving in from front to back, So it's really, really cool.
Yeah,
I've already read chapter one.
I'm actually jealous, John. I know we're on only audio, but I'm looking at you on video, and you're holding up a physical copy, which I haven't got yet. I've got the ebook, but sometimes I just like reading from books. Yeah, so I've been waiting to get hold of a physical copy myself. So I've not got it yet. So I'm jealous. You're ahead of me.
It's really, really good. It's a beautiful book. So it's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mike. We really appreciate having you on the show.
Yeah, well, thanks again. And I look forward to, it's going to be next year till I maybe see some of you, if not both of you, in the US when I'm over. But until then, happy to chat anytime. So take care and all the best.
Thank you. Yeah. And we want to thank our recent patrons for joining the show. Obsession Engine, thank you so much for your support.
Thank you. I also want to thank Brian Stevens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. And Xander Ford, thank you for your support.
Thank you, Xander. And Charlie, I am going to mispronounce this. Charlie, Ow?
I'd say O. Charlie O.
Charlie O. Well, thank you, Charlie. I'm sorry for butchering your name because I'm positive I did.
And Jim Calabrese, we really appreciate you joining the cultist level. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you to all of our patrons. If you are also interested in becoming a patron, we have a link in the show notes at patreon.com/Modern Mythos. We also have a Redbubble store. Obviously can't see it because this is audio only, but I'm wearing one of our signature Modern Mythos t-shirts. So it's a lot of fun. Check it out and hit our Redbubble store. We cannot do this show alone. We want to thank our editors, Max Mahaffa and Edwin Nagy, for their hard work and keen skills in making us sound awesome.
Thank you, guys. We also want to thank Sean Sumro for our badass logo. He's a very talented artist, so please follow him on Facebook, check out his official website, and please consider joining his Patreon. Links below.
And finally, we want to thank the Darkest of the Hillside Thickets for generously allowing us to use their song Gluttony as our intro and outro music. If you're a fan of Lovecraft's work and the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, you really need to check out the Darkest of the Hillside Thickets. Please check out their Bandcamp site and their official band site. Links are below in the show notes.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.